Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he checked his scanner again. The readings made no sense. The ground beneath Kepler 442b showed mineral deposits that shouldn't exist together. Iron and platinum mixed with elements he had never seen before. He had been working as a geological surveyor on this planet for 8 months, but today felt different. "Hey, Jake, you getting weird readings too?" Lisa Park called from across the Rocky Valley. She was the team medic, but she helped with sample collection when things got slow. Her blonde hair was tied back under her helmet, and she looked worried. "Yeah. The scanner keeps showing energy signatures," Jake replied, walking over to where she stood. "But there's nothing here that should give off energy like this." Carl Bennett looked up from his equipment repairs. The engineer was always fixing something, and today he was working on their communication array. "I'm getting interference on all channels," he said. "Something big is messing with our signals." Tony Rodriguez emerged from behind a large boulder. His security rifle ready? The former Marine had been jumpy all morning. "We need to head back to base camp," he said firmly. "I don't like how quiet it's gotten. Where are all the birds?" Jake looked around and realized Tony was right. The small flying creatures that usually filled the air with their calls had vanished. Even the insect-like creatures that buzzed around. The mineral formations were gone. The silence felt heavy and wrong. "Pack it up," Jake decided. "We can finish the survey tomorrow." But as they gathered their equipment, the ground began to shake. At first, it felt like a small earthquake. Then, the shaking got stronger. Rocks tumbled down from the cliffs around them. "That's not a quake," Tony said, raising his rifle. "Something's coming." The sky above them darkened. Jake looked up and saw shapes moving across the sun. At first he thought they were clouds. Then he realized the shapes were moving too fast and in too organized a pattern. "Ships," Carl whispered. "Hundreds of them." The ships were unlike anything Jake had ever seen. They looked organic, like giant insects with wings that moved in slow waves. They were black and covered in what looked like armor plating. As they got closer, Jake could see they were massive, each one the size of a city block. "We need to get to the emergency shelter," Lisa said, her voice shaking. "Now." They ran toward the nearest cave system, where they had set up an emergency supply cache. The caves went deep into the planet's crust and would provide some protection. As they ran, Jake heard sounds behind them that made his blood freeze, screaming, not human screaming, but something else. Something that sounded like metal being torn apart, mixed with the cries of dying animals. "Don't look back," Tony shouted. "Just run," but Jake couldn't help himself. He glanced over his shoulder and saw creatures pouring out of the landed ships. They moved on 4 legs but could rear up on their hind legs to use clawed arms. They were covered in the same black armor as their ships. Their heads were long and narrow, filled with rows of sharp teeth. The creatures moved fast, faster than anything that size should be able to move. They spread out across the landscape like a flood of death. Jake and his team reached the cave entrance just as explosions began erupting across the valley. The emergency shelter was 50 meters inside the cave system, behind blast doors that would seal automatically if the base was attacked. "The blast doors are closing," Carl yelled. "We're not going to make it." Tony turned and fired his rifle at the cave entrance as the first of the creatures appeared. His shots seemed to bounce off their armor. "Go, go, go," he screamed. They dove through the closing blast doors just as the creatures reached them. Jake felt claws scrape across his back, tearing through his jacket but not reaching skin. The doors slammed shut with a loud clang. Inside the shelter, they caught their breath. The shelter was designed to hold 20 people for a month. It had food, water, medical supplies, and communication equipment. "Is everyone okay?" Lisa asked, checking each of them for injuries. "What were those things?" Carl said, shaking as he tried to contact the main colony base. "I'm getting nothing," Carl reported after several minutes of trying different frequencies. "Either our communication is completely jammed or ... Or there's no one left to answer," Tony finished. They sat in silence for a moment, letting that possibility sink in. The main colony had 15,000 people. The orbital defense platforms had enough firepower to destroy a fleet. But those creatures had moved with such speed and organization. We need to find out what's happening, Jake sighed. Carl, can you access the Planetary Defense Network through the hardline connection? Carl worked at the communication console for an hour before getting a weak signal. What they saw on the screen made them all feel sick. The images were from orbital cameras that were still functioning. The main colony was burning. The defense platforms were twisted metal floating in space. Ships were landing everywhere across the planet's surface, disgorging more of the black armored creatures. The evacuation ships, Lisa whispered, pointing. At the screen, they're all destroyed. They didn't even make it off the ground. Jake watched as the creatures moved through the burning colony. They weren't just killing. They were collecting something, dragging bodies toward their ships, the living and the dead. We need to move deeper into the cave system, Tony said. These blast doors won't hold them for long if they find us. As if his words were a signal, they heard sounds from outside the doors, scratching, clicking. The creatures had found their shelter. There's another tunnel, Carl said, checking the cave maps. It goes deeper into the mountain. Connects to the old mining system. They gathered supplies quickly. Food, water, medical supplies, and weapons. Not much, but enough to survive for a few days while they figured out what to do next. The scratching at the blast doors got louder. Then they heard something else. A sound like metal being cut. They're getting through, Tony said. Move! They entered the deeper tunnel system just as the blast doors began to glow red hot. The creatures were using some kind of cutting tool to burn through the reinforced metal. The tunnels were dark and cold. Their flashlights created moving shadows that made every corner look like it might hide an enemy. They moved as quietly as they could, but their breathing sounded loud in the narrow spaces dotted. After an hour of walking through the winding tunnels, they reached a large cavern. Jake was checking his map when Lisa grabbed his arm. Listen, she whispered. In the distance, they could hear voices. Not human voices, but not the sounds the black creatures made either. These voices were different, deeper, more controlled. We're not alone down here, Carl said quietly. Tony raised his rifle, but Jake put a hand on his arm. Wait, if they wanted to kill us, we'd already be dead. Let's see who else is hiding in these caves. They moved toward the voices carefully. As they got closer, they could see light ahead. Not the harsh white light of human technology, but something softer and more orange. When they reached the edge of the light, Jake saw something that made him question his sanity. The cavern was full of creatures. But these weren't the black armored killers from above. These creatures stood on two legs like humans, but they were 8 feet tall and covered in what looked like natural armor plating. Their arms ended in claws, but they used tools and weapons with careful precision. They were clearly intelligent. They had set up a camp with organized sleeping areas and equipment stations. And they were preparing for war. One of the creatures noticed the humans watching from the shadows. It was larger than the others, with scars across its armored face. It spoke in its deep voice to the others, then approached the humans slowly. Jake realized that he was about to meet his first alien ally, and he had no idea if they would see humans as friends or food. The large alien creature stopped 3 feet away from Jake and his team. Up close, Jake could see that its armor wasn't metal but natural bone-like plating that grew from its skin. The creature's eyes were large and dark, showing intelligence. That reminded Jake of a hunting cat. You are the softskins from above, the creature said in heavily accented but clear English. I am Crixtal, war leader of the Zithari survivors. Jake stepped forward slowly, keeping his hands visible. Jake Morrison. These are my teammates Lisa, Carl, and Tony. We're the only humans left from our survey team. Crixtal made a sound that might have been laughter. Survey team. You came here to study rocks while death fell from the sky. Your species is either very brave or very stupid. Probably both, Jake admitted. What are those things that attacked us? The Vorthic, Crixtal replied, and all the other Zithari in the cavern made low growling sounds. They have been hunting my people across 7 star systems. We thought we had escaped them here, Lisa stepped forward. Are you hurt? Any of your people? I'm a medic. Crystal looked at her with surprise. You would tend to our wounded? Even though we are not your kind? Injured is injured, Lisa said simply. That's all that matters to me. For the next 3 weeks, the humans lived alongside the Zithari in the cave system. Jake learned that the Zithari were natural warriors who had been fighting the Vorthok longer than humans had known aliens existed. They were faster and stronger than humans, with claws that could cut through metal and armor that could stop most weapons. But what impressed Jake most was how they fought as a team. He watched them practice combat maneuvers in the larger caverns. They moved like a pack of wolves, each warrior knowing exactly where the others would be. They communicated through scent signals that humans couldn't detect and hand gestures that were too fast to follow. Carl became fascinated with their technology. The Zithari didn't build machines the way humans did. Instead, they grew them from living materials. Their weapons were part plant, part animal, and part machine. They fed on organic matter and could repair themselves if damaged. Look at this, Carl showed Jake one morning, holding a Zithari cutting tool. It's not just a tool, it's alive. When it gets dull, it sharpens itself. When it breaks, it heals. It's amazing. Tony spent his time learning Zithari fighting techniques. The alien warriors were impressed with his dedication, even though he could never match their natural speed and strength. Your species is weak in body, one of them told him, but strong in spirit. That counts for much in war. Lisa had become the unofficial doctor for both species. She learned to treat Zithari injuries and showed them how to help wounded humans. The aliens were amazed by human medicine. Their bodies healed naturally from most injuries, but they had never learned to use tools to speed the process. Your healing knowledge is powerful, Crystal told her one day. My warriors trust you more. Then they trust their own healers now. Jake found himself becoming a bridge between the two groups. He learned enough of the Zithari language to communicate basic ideas, and he helped them understand human thinking. The aliens found humans confusing because they didn't follow instinct the way other species did. You make choices that go against your own survival, Crystal said during one of their evening talks. Yesterday, your Tony threw himself in front of claws to protect one of my young warriors. A human cannot survive such an attack, yet he did it anyway. Why? Because it was the right thing to do, Jake replied. We don't just think about ourselves. Strange, Crystal mused. But perhaps useful. Their first real battle together came when a Vorthok patrol found one of their food-gathering teams. Jake was with the team, along with 2 Zithari warriors named Thacaron and Veltara. They were collecting edible fungi from a flooded section of the caves when they heard the clicking sounds that meant Vorthok were nearby. How many? Thacaron whispered. Jake used his scanner to detect movement. 5, maybe 6. Coming from the main tunnel, Veltara made quick hand signals to her partner. Jake had learned some of the basic battle signals, but they were moving too fast for him to follow. What he understood was that they planned to attack head-on. Wait, Jake said quietly. I have an idea. The Zithari looked at him with surprise. Humans weren't supposed to make battle plans. The tunnel branches up ahead, Jake explained. If we make noise here, they'll follow the sound. You 2 can circle around behind them. And you? Thacaron asked. I'll be the bait. It was a simple plan, but it worked. Jake made noise in the main tunnel, drawing the Vorthok toward him. When they were fully committed to following his trail, the 2 Zithari attacked from behind. The battle was over in seconds. Your mind works in twisted ways, Veltara said afterward, but she sounded approving. The Vorthok expect direct attack? Your deception confused them. Word of the successful ambush spread through the Zithari camp. Warriors who had barely acknowledged the humans before began asking Jake questions about tactics and strategy. You think like prey, one of them said. But you use that thinking to become the hunter. Interesting. As the weeks passed, Jake noticed other survivor groups finding their way to the cave system. First came the ethereals, tall crystalline beings who could manipulate energy fields. They looked like living statues made of colored glass, and they spoke in harmonic tones that hurt human ears. The ethereals were peaceful by nature, but the Vorthic invasion had forced them to fight. They could create energy shields and fire beams of pure force, but they struggled with close combat. They preferred to fight from a distance. Next came the depths, an aquatic species that looked like a cross between dolphins and squids. They could breathe both water and air, and they moved through the flooded sections of the caves like they were flying. They were experts at stealth and ambush tactics. Each species brought different abilities to the growing resistance. The Zithari were the shock troops, the ethereals provided long-range support, and the depths handled reconnaissance and sabotage. The humans found themselves filling gaps that the other species couldn't cover. Jake became an unofficial coordinator. Helping the different groups work together? It wasn't easy. The species had different ways of thinking and communicating. The Zithari made decisions quickly based on instinct. The ethereals thought everything through carefully, sometimes taking hours to reach a conclusion. The depths preferred to work alone and had trouble trusting others. "This is impossible," Carl said one evening after a particularly frustrating planning session. "They're all too different. How can we make them work together?" Jake watched the different groups in their camp. The Zithari were practicing combat drills. The ethereals were meditating in their harmonic way. The depths were swimming in the underground pools. Each group stayed mostly separate from the others. "Maybe that's our job," Jake said slowly. "Maybe humans are supposed to be the ones who help them work together." Lisa looked up from her medical supplies. "What do you mean?" "Look at us," Jake said. "We're not the strongest or the smartest or the fastest. But we're the only ones who can talk to all of them. We're the only ones who try to understand how they think." Tony nodded. "Like translators, but not just for language?" "Exactly," Jake said. "We translate ideas. We help them see what the others are thinking." Their theory was put to the test when scouts reported a massive Vorthak force moving toward their cave system. Thousands of the black-armored creatures were spreading across the surface, systematically searching every possible hiding place. "We cannot fight so many," Crixtel said during the emergency meeting. "Even working together, we are too few." "The mountain has many deep places," the ethereal representative said in its musical voice. "We could retreat further underground." "Retreating only delays death," one of the depths warriors said. "Better to strike fast and disappear." Each species favored a different strategy based on their natural abilities. The Zithari wanted to fight. The ethereals wanted to hide. The depths wanted to run. None of them could see how the other's ideas might work. Jake stood up. "What if we do all three?" The alien representatives looked at him with confusion. "The depths are right about striking fast," Jake explained. "But not to run away, to draw them off. The ethereals are right about using the deep places, but not to hide forever, to set up a defensive position. And the Zithari are right about fighting. But not head-on, we fight smart." He moved to the cave wall where they had drawn maps of the mountain. "Here's what I'm thinking. The depths hit their forward scouts and disappear. That draws the main force toward the flooded sections. The ethereals set up shields and energy weapons in the narrow tunnels here. When the Vorthek follow the depths into the kill zone, the Zithari attack from above." Crixtel studied the plan. "It could work, but it requires perfect timing. If any group moves too early or too late, we all die? Then we don't mess up the timing." Jake said simply. For the first time since the invasion began, Jake saw something in the aliens' eyes that hadn't been there before. Hope. Not just hope for survival, but hope that they might actually win. The battle for the caves was coming, and they would face it together. The battle for the caves lasted 14 hours. Jake's plan worked better than anyone had expected. The depths struck the Vorthak scouts with lightning speed, then vanished into the flooded tunnels. The enemy followed exactly as predicted, pouring into the narrow passages where the ethereals waited with their energy weapons. When the Vorthak were trapped in the kill zone, the Zithari dropped from hidden positions above and tore through them with savage efficiency. It was the first real victory any of the species had won against the invaders, but victory came with a price. Crickstal was badly wounded during the final assault, his natural armor cracked and bleeding. Lisa worked on him for hours while Jake coordinated the cleanup of the battlefield. "He will live," Lisa announced finally, "but he needs time to heal, weeks, maybe months. The injury changed everything." Without their war leader, the Zithari began to split into smaller groups. Each clan wanted to choose their own path. Some wanted to keep fighting. Others wanted to find a new planet to hide on. A few even talked about surrendering to the Vorthek. "This is what always happens," Valtara explained to Jake sadly. "When the strong leader falls, we follow our old ways. Each clan for itself." Jake watched the arguments in the main cavern with growing worry. The Zithari weren't the only ones having problems. The ethereals had retreated to their meditation chambers and refused to come out. They claimed the violence of the battle had damaged their spiritual harmony. The depths were already packing their gear. Their leader, a scarred warrior named Flowswift, told Jake they were leaving for the ocean. "Land war is not our way," Flowswift said. "We return to deep waters where we belong." 6 months of cooperation was falling apart in just days? Jake felt responsible. He had convinced them to work together, and now they were abandoning each other when they needed unity most. "We have to do something," Carl said. He had been trying to repair their long-range communication equipment, hoping to contact other survivor groups. If they all split up, the Vorthak will hunt them down one by one. Tony was cleaning his weapons, but Jake could see the frustration in his movements. "Maybe we should pick one group and stick with them. The Zithari respect us. We could probably join one of their clans." "And leave the others to die?" Lisa asked sharply. She had been treating wounded from all the species and had grown attached to many of them. "That's not who we are," Jake thought about what Lisa had said. She was right. Humans didn't abandon allies even when things got difficult. But how could 4 humans convince dozens of aliens to stay together when their own instincts told them to separate? The answer came from an unexpected source. While checking on Crickstal, Jake overheard the wounded war leader talking to his lieutenant, Thacaron. "The soft-skins fight strangely," Crickstal said weakly. "They do not follow the pack way, or the honor way. They follow something else." "What way do they follow?" Thacaron asked. "The choose way," Crickstal replied. "They decide what is right, then they do it, even when it hurts them, even when it makes no sense." Jake realized that Crickstal had identified something important. Humans didn't just follow instinct like the other species. They made conscious choices about how to act, and they could stick to those choices even when everything went wrong. That evening, Jake called a meeting of all the species representatives. The gathering was tense. Everyone expected him to announce that the humans were choosing a side. "I want to tell you a story," Jake began instead, "about something that happened on Earth, our home planet." The aliens looked confused. This wasn't what they expected. "A long time ago, our world was divided into many groups that fought each other constantly. They had different languages, different beliefs, different ways of living. They seemed too different to ever work together." Jake looked around the cavern at the assembled aliens. Then something threatened all of them. An enemy that would destroy everyone if they didn't unite. Most people said it was impossible. The groups were too different. They had too much history of conflict. "What happened?" Valtara asked, despite herself. "They chose to work together anyway," Jake said simply. "Not because it was easy. Not because they suddenly became the same. But because they decided that survival was more important than old grudges." Flowswift made a dismissive sound. "Pretty story, soft skin, but your people are all the same species. We are not." "You're right," Jake agreed. "You're all completely different. The Zithari are warriors. The ethereals are thinkers. The depths are hunters. You don't have the same instincts or the same goals." He stood up and walked to the center of the circle. "But you all want to live. You all want to protect your people. And you all hate the Vorthik for what they've done to your worlds. Hatred is not enough to bind us," the ethereal representative sang mournfully. "Our ways are too different." "Then learn new ways," Jake said firmly. "That's what humans do." When the old ways don't work, we invent new ones. Tony stepped forward to support his friend. Jake's right. Look what we've accomplished in just 6 months. We've taken territories the Vorthik thought they controlled. We've rescued survivors from 3 different star systems. We've proven that working together makes us stronger. Carl had been quiet during the meeting, but now he spoke up. I've been monitoring Vorthak communications. They're confused by our tactics. They don't understand how different species can coordinate so well. It's giving them problems they've never had before, Lisa added her voice to the argument. Every day we stay together, we save lives. Zathari lives. Ethereal lives. Depths lives. Human lives. Every day we split apart, more people die alone. The meeting went late into the night. Arguments flew back and forth in multiple languages. Old grievances surfaced. Ancient tribal instincts demanded separation. But slowly Jake saw something. Changing in their eyes, the ethereal representative was the first to speak for unity. Perhaps harmony can be found in discord, it sang thoughtfully. Perhaps different notes can make beautiful music together. Flowswift was harder to convince. Ocean people should stay in ocean. Land people should stay on land. This is natural way. Natural way got us all nearly extinct, Veltara pointed out. Maybe we need unnatural way now. The debate continued. For 3 more days. Jake spent most of his time moving between the different groups, listening to their concerns, and helping them find common ground. He learned that leadership wasn't about being the strongest or the smartest. It was about helping others see past their own limitations. On the 4th day, scouts brought news that changed everything. A massive Vorthak fleet had arrived in the system. Not just the raiders they had been fighting, but a full invasion force with ships the size of small moons. Hundreds of ships, the scout reported. More Vorthak than we have ever seen in one place. They are preparing to consume this entire star system. The news hit the survivors like a physical blow. Even working together, they had barely been able to fight off small Vorthak patrols. How could they possibly stand against a force that large? This is why we must scatter, Flowswift said immediately. Some might escape if we spread in all directions? No, Jake said quietly, but his voice carried clearly through the cavern. This is why we must stay together. All eyes turned to him. He looked tired. The strain of the last few months had aged him, but his determination was stronger than ever. You're all thinking like prey, Jake continued. The Vorthak expect us to run. They expect us to hide. They expect us to give up. He walked to the wall where they kept their star charts. But what if we don't do what they expect? What if we attack them instead? The suggestion was so crazy that several aliens made sounds of disbelief. Attack a fleet of hundreds with our few dozen ships? Thackerone asked. That is not bravery. That is madness. Maybe, Jake admitted. But I've been studying their patterns for months. Carl has been analyzing their technology. Lisa has been learning about their biology from captured specimens. And Tony has been planning strike operations that could actually work. He pointed to various locations on the star chart. They're not invincible. They have weaknesses. They rely too heavily on their hive communication. They assume all enemies will act the same way. And they've never faced a truly united resistance before. Even if you are right about their weaknesses, the ethereal representative said, we do not have the numbers to exploit them. We don't need numbers, Jake replied. We need something the Vorthak have never encountered before. We need species. Working together so closely that we become something new. Something they can't predict or counter. The cavern fell silent as the aliens considered his words. Finally, Crickstall spoke from his recovery bed. His voice was weak but clear. The soft skin speaks truth. Apart, we are food for the hive. Together, we might be something they fear. One by one, the representatives of each species gave their agreement. Not because they believed victory was certain, but because they chose to trust in something larger than themselves. Jake felt the weight of their decision. These beings were placing their lives and the lives of their people in human hands. It was a responsibility he had never asked for, but one he would carry no matter what came next. The real war was about to begin. Jake stared at the massive Vorthok mothership on the scanner display. It was bigger than anything they had imagined possible. The ship looked like a twisted mountain floating in space, covered in organic growths and weapon ports. Smaller ships swarmed around it like insects around a hive. "How many do you think are in there?" Tony asked, studying the tactical readouts. Carl adjusted the scanner settings, trying to get better readings. "The energy signatures suggest millions." "Maybe tens?" "Of millions. This isn't just an invasion force. It's their entire civilization." The United Resistance had grown over the past month. More survivor groups had joined them, including refugees from other planets the Vorthok had attacked. They now had almost 200 ships of various sizes and capabilities. It sounded like a lot until you compared it to the enemy fleet. "We're outnumbered 1,000 to 1, Lisa said quietly. She had been coordinating medical supplies across all the ships, preparing for massive casualties. Jake turned away from the scanner and looked at his friends. They had all changed during their months of fighting. Tony moved with the confident grace of a veteran warrior. Carl had learned to think like an engineer and a strategist at the same time. Lisa had become a leader that aliens from dozens of species trusted with their lives. "We knew the odds would be bad," Jake said, "but we also know something they don't." "What's that?" Carl asked. "We know their weakness," Jake replied, "and we have a plan to exploit it." The plan had taken weeks to develop. It required precise coordination between all the different species, using their unique abilities in ways that had never been tried before. Most importantly, it required someone to get inside the Vorthok mothership and reach their central control. Know that someone was Jake? "I still think this is suicide," Veltara said as she helped Jake into a captured Vorthok stealth suit. The organic armor felt wrong against his skin, but it would hide his human scent and energy signature from the enemy sensors. "Probably," Jake agreed. "But someone has to do it, and I'm the only one small enough to fit through the maintenance tunnels Carl identified." The Vorthok armor was designed for their insectoid physiology. The arms and legs were too long for Jake, and the helmet pressed uncomfortably against his skull. But it would fool their sensors long enough for him to get inside their ship. Crystal limped over to where Jake was preparing. The Zithari war leader was still recovering from his injuries, but he insisted on leading part of the assault. "You understand what you must do once you reach their nerve center?" Jake nodded. "Carl's neural disruptor should work if I can get close enough to their main communication hub. The human brain patterns are different enough from other species that I should be able to resist their hive influence long enough to plant the device." "Should," Crystal repeated grimly. "Much depends on should in this plan." Flo Swift emerged from the water tank where his people had been making final preparations. The Depths had volunteered for the most dangerous part of the assault, using their stealth abilities to disable the mothership's outer defenses. "Current flows are favorable," Flo Swift reported in his strange translated speech. "My hunters will clear the path, but the window will be small. You must move quickly once we begin." The ethereal coordinator approached, its crystalline body glowing with nervous energy. "The harmonic disruption charges are in place. When you activate the neural disruptor, we will begin the frequency assault. But remember, you must be clear of the interference zone before we start, or your mind will be damaged along with theirs." Jake checked his equipment one final time. The neural disruptor was a small device that Carl had built based on his studies of Vorthok technology and human brain patterns. It was untested, experimental, and probably dangerous. But it was their only hope of disrupting the hive mind that coordinated the entire Vorthok fleet. 30 minutes until we reach the assault point," Tony announced from the pilot's position. He would be leading the main attack force, drawing the Vorthok's attention while Jake infiltrated their mothership. Jake looked around at the mixed crew on their bridge. Humans, Zithari, Ethereals, and Depths working together with a precision that had taken months to develop. Each species contributed their strengths while covering for others' weaknesses. "Remember the timing," Jake said to all of them. Everything depends on coordination. If any group moves too early or too late, we all die? We understand, Veltara said firmly. We have trained for this. We will not fail you. The assault began exactly as planned. Flow Swift and his depths hunters struck the mothership's outer sensor arrays, creating blind spots in their detection grid. The Vorthak response was immediate and overwhelming, but the attackers had already vanished into the ship's massive structure. Tony led the main fleet in a frontal assault on the Vorthak escort ships. The battle was fierce and chaotic with energy, weapons lighting up space like deadly fireworks. The Allied fleet was heavily outnumbered, but they fought with desperate courage. While the Vorthak were distracted by the obvious attacks, Jake's small infiltration ship slipped through the gaps. In their defenses, the ship was barely large enough for one person and had no weapons or shields. Its only advantage was stealth technology borrowed from 3 different species. I'm approaching the docking port, Jake reported quietly into his communicator. No signs of detection yet. Getting inside the mothership was the easy part. The real challenge began once he was inside. The Vorthak ship was like a living organism, with corridors that pulsed like arteries and walls that felt warm to the touch. Everything was designed for creatures much larger than humans. Jake crawled through maintenance shafts that were barely wide enough for his body. The captured armor helped him blend in with the ship's organic systems, but he could feel the alien environment trying to influence his mind. Whispers and languages he didn't understand echoed through the passages. Stay focused, he told himself. Don't listen to the voices. The deeper he went into the ship, the stronger the mental pressure became. The Vorthak hive mind was incredibly powerful, and it was starting to notice his presence. Jake felt his thoughts becoming fuzzy, his sense of purpose wavering. He stopped and forced himself to remember why he was there. Images flashed through his mind. The burning colony, his friends fighting impossible odds, Lisa treating wounded aliens with the same care she gave to humans, Tony teaching Zithari warriors new tactics, Carl sharing technology with species he'd never seen before. The memories strengthened his resolve. Humans weren't just fighting for themselves. They were fighting for the idea that different species could choose to work together, instead of conquering or being conquered. Jake reached the central chamber after 2 hours of crawling through the ship's internal systems. The nerve center was a vast organic cathedral filled with pulsing nodes and flowing data streams. At the center sat a massive biomechanical construct that served as the hive mind's physical anchor. Thousands of Vorthak workers moved through the chamber, tending to the various systems. Jake realized that they weren't really individuals anymore. They were parts of a single mind that spanned the entire fleet. Their movements were perfectly coordinated because they shared a single consciousness. It's horrible, Jake whispered to himself. They gave up everything that made them alive. He worked his way closer to the central hub, using his human-sized body to hide in spaces too small for the Vorthak workers. The neural disruptor felt heavy in his hands. Such a small device to carry so much hope. When he was close enough, Jake activated the disruptor and threw it at the base of the central hub. The device attached itself with biomechanical tendrils and began its work immediately. The effect was instant and devastating. The hive mind's communications began to break down as the disruptor flooded their network with chaotic human thought patterns. Vorthak workers stopped in confusion, suddenly cut off from the collective consciousness that had guided their every action. Alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Jake had maybe 5 minutes before they adapted to the disruption or found a way to remove the device. He activated his communicator and sent the signal his friends were waiting for. Now, he shouted, hit them now while they're confused. Throughout the fleet battle, the Allied forces suddenly changed tactics. The Ethereals began their harmonic assault, sending disruptive frequencies that interfered with Vorthak coordination. The Zithari strike teams that had been hidden among the escort ships activated and began attacking critical systems. The depths emerged from their hiding places and started sabotaging the mothership's engines, but Jake's job wasn't finished. The disruptor was working, but the Vorthek were already trying to adapt. He could see them working to isolate the infected sections of their network. If they succeeded, the hive mind would recover within minutes. Jake made a decision that he knew would probably cost him his life. Instead of trying to escape, he grabbed several backup disruptors from his equipment pack and began placing them at different nodes throughout the chamber. Each device he placed drew more attention from the Vorthek defenders. Energy blasts began, striking the walls around him as they realized what he was doing. Jake felt pain as one of the shots grazed his arm, but he kept moving. "Come on," he muttered, placing the final disruptor. "Just a little more time?" Lisa stared at the scanner in disbelief. "Tony, look at this." Jake's life signs are still showing on the mothership. Tony was coordinating the fleet attack, but he immediately turned his attention to her readings. "Are you sure?" "The ship is falling apart." "I'm sure," Lisa said firmly. "He's alive, and I'm going to get him." Carl looked up from his tactical station. "The Vorthak fleet is in complete chaos. Half their ships have stopped responding to commands. The other half are attacking each other. This is our chance to finish them. Then we finish them and save Jake," Tony declared. "Veltara, can your strike team reach the mothership?" The Zithari warrior checked her team's status. "My ships are fast, but that vessel is dying. We have maybe 10 minutes before it breaks apart completely." Flo Swift's voice came through the communication system. "Deep hunters can reach the soft skin. Our ships move through wreckage like water through stones." "Do it," Tony ordered. "Everyone else, keep hitting the Vorthak while they're confused. Don't give them time to reorganize." The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. For the first time in their history, the Vorthak were fighting as individuals. Instead of a unified hive mind, some tried to retreat. Others continued attacking randomly. Many simply stopped fighting entirely. Overwhelmed by suddenly having to think for themselves, the Allied fleet pressed their advantage with devastating effect. Zithari fighters tore through enemy formations that could no longer coordinate their defenses. Ethereal energy weapons carved apart ships whose shields were no longer synchronized. Depth stealth vessels appeared inside Vorthak formations and destroyed them from within. But the most effective attacks came from the mixed crews that humans had helped train. Ships with Zithari warriors, ethereal technicians, and depth scouts working together under human tactical coordination proved unstoppable. Against the now divided enemy, meanwhile, Flo Swift led a desperate rescue mission into the dying mothership. His sleek vessel slipped through the massive hull breaches and navigated the collapsing internal structure with impossible grace. "Soft-skin signals come from deep inside," Flo Swift reported. "Very dangerous. Ship death throes are strong." "Just get him out," Lisa pleaded through the communicator. Flo Swift found Jake in the central chamber, unconscious but alive. The human was trapped under fallen debris from the collapsing organic architecture. The Depths warrior used his natural strength to lift the wreckage and pull Jake free. "Soft skin breathes," Flo Swift announced as he carried Jake toward his ship, "but barely. Needs healing human quickly." The evacuation was a race against time. The mothership was tearing itself apart as its biological systems failed. Entire sections were venting atmosphere into space. Flo Swift's ship barely escaped before the massive vessel finally broke apart in a series of spectacular explosions. Lisa worked frantically to stabilize Jake during the flight back to the main fleet. He had multiple injuries and was suffering from exposure to the alien ship's dying atmosphere. But he was alive, and that was what mattered. "Is he going to be okay?" Tony asked when Flo Swift's ship docked with their command vessel. "He will live," Lisa said after completing her examination. "But he's going to need time to recover? Weeks, maybe months?" Jake woke up 3 days later in the medical bay. The first thing he saw was Lisa's face, tired but smiling. Behind her stood Tony, Carl, Veltara, Flo Swift, and Crystal, who was finally recovered from his own injuries. "Did we win?" Jake asked weakly. "We won," Tony confirmed. "The Vorthak fleet is destroyed. The survivors are scattered across a dozen star systems, and they're no longer acting as a hive mind. Your neural disruptors worked perfectly. Too perfectly, Carl added with a grin. The disruption spread through their entire network. Every Vorthik in the galaxy has been cut off from the hive mind. They're all individuals now, whether they like it or not. Jake tried to sit up, but Lisa gently pushed him back down. Rest. You've been unconscious for 3 days. Your body needs time to heal. What happens now? Jake asked. With the Vorthak, Krikstal stepped forward. That is complicated question, soft skin. Many of them are lost and confused. They have never been individuals before. Some are violent, others are frightened, a few seem almost grateful. We're trying to help the peaceful ones, Lisa explained. They're still alien and dangerous, but some of them want to learn how to live without the hive mind. It's going to take time. Flo Swift made his clicking laugh sound. Strange tide turn. Yesterday they were death swarm. Today they are lost. Children, galaxy is a very strange place. Over the following weeks, as Jake recovered, he learned about the massive changes happening throughout the galaxy. The destruction of the Vorthak hive mind had created a power vacuum that was being filled by the alliance of species that humans had helped create. The Zithari were establishing new colonies on worlds the Vorthak had abandoned. But instead of following their old clan system, they were experimenting with mixed communities that included other species. The Ethereals were sharing their energy manipulation technology with allies, something they had never done before. They claimed that the harmony they had experienced during the battle had shown them new possibilities for cooperation. The depths were serving as messengers and traders between the different worlds, using their speed and stealth to maintain communication. Across the growing alliance, most surprisingly, some of the former Vorthak were asking to join the alliance. Cut off from their hive mind, they were struggling to survive as individuals. A few had approached human mediators, asking for help in learning how to think for themselves. It's ironic, Carl said during one of their planning meetings. We spent months fighting them, and now we're teaching them how to be free. Jake was finally strong enough to attend the first Galactic Council meeting 6 months after the battle. Representatives from dozens of species gathered on a neutral space station to discuss the future of their alliance. The council chamber was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Each species had contributed their expertise to create a space where everyone could participate comfortably. Zithari's strength, ethereal energy systems, depths, fluid dynamics, and human coordination had combined to build something none of them could have created alone. Jake found himself elected as the first human ambassador to the council, despite his protests that he was just a former rock surveyor. The other species insisted that humans had earned a leadership role through their actions during the war. We do not understand your species, the ethereal representative said during Jake's formal appointment. You are weak in body, simple in technology, brief in lifespan. Yet you make us stronger when we stand beside you. How is this possible? Jake thought about the question for a long time before answering. I think it's because we see possibilities instead of limitations. When we look at the Zithari, we don't just see warriors. We see teachers and protectors and friends. When we look at the Ethereals, we don't just see energy manipulators. We see artists and philosophers and healers. He looked around the council chamber at the assembled species. Every species has strengths and weaknesses. But when you work together, the strengths can cover the weaknesses. The trick is learning to trust each other enough to try. Krikstal made his approving growl. Soft skin speaks wisdom. My people fought alone for generations and accomplished little. In 6 months of fighting beside others, we achieved victory. That seemed impossible. Flo Swift added his voice to the discussion. Current flows in new directions now. Deep hunters swim beside skyflyers and groundwalkers. Strange tides, but good tides. The council session lasted for 3 days as the different species worked out the details of their continuing alliance. There were disagreements and misunderstandings, but they kept working through the problems instead of giving up. Jake realized that this was humanity's true gift to the galaxy. Not superior technology or overwhelming strength, but the stubborn refusal to accept that differences had to mean division. Humans saw diversity as a source of strength rather than a problem to be solved. As the council concluded its first session, Jake stood at an observation window looking out at the stars. Ships from dozens of different species moved through space together, their crews learning to work side by side. Lisa joined him at the window. "Thinking about home?" she asked. "I am home," Jake replied. "Earth is where I came from, but this is where I belong now. Out here, helping people figure out how to get along." Tony and Carl approached from behind. "The next council session is in 3 months," Tony reported. "They want us to help establish trade routes and defense networks. It's going to be a lot of work." "Good," Jake said simply. "I like staying busy." Carl was studying a tablet full of technical specifications. The Ethereals want to share their energy shield technology with everyone. The Zethari are offering military training to peaceful species. The Depths want to establish communication networks between all the worlds. "And the former Vorthek?" Lisa asked. 12 groups have asked to join the alliance," Jake said. "They're having a hard time learning to be individuals, but some of them are making progress. It's going to take generations, but I think they can learn to be something other than conquerors."